Red Dead Redemption 2 features some of the most meticulously crafted towns in gaming history, each with its own personality, secrets, and surprising real-world connections. But what you probably don't know is that Rockstar didn't just randomly create these settlements. Many are based on actual historical towns, while others draw inspiration from real places that shaped the American frontier. Annesburg. Annesburg sits at the bottom of our list, and for good reason. This grimy mining town feels more like an industrial nightmare than a place anyone would want to visit. The town is directly inspired by real Appalachian mining communities of the late 1800s, particularly those in Pennsylvania and West Virginia. The name Annesburg likely derives from Annesborough, following the common practice of naming mining towns after the wives or daughters of mine owners. Historically, these mining towns were notorious for dangerous working conditions, company stores that kept workers in debt, and the constant threat of cave-ins. Rockstar captured this perfectly. You can feel the desperation and danger in every coal-stained building. What's particularly haunting is how the developers included the sound design of constant machinery and coughing miners, reflecting the reality that black lung disease killed more miners than accidents. The company housing system shown in-game mirrors real practices where mining companies owned everything from homes to stores, creating a cycle of debt that trapped entire families for generations. Strawberry. Strawberry might look picturesque with its mountain setting, but it's essentially a one-street town with limited character development. The town draws inspiration from small logging communities in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California. Towns like Strawberry, California, yes, there's a real one, were established during the gold rush era as supply stops for miners and loggers. The real Strawberry, California, was founded in 1858 and served as a stagecoach stop. The name comes from the wild strawberries that grew abundantly in the area. Rockstar chose this name to evoke that same sense of natural abundance, hiding the harsh realities of frontier life. What's fascinating is how Rockstar included the town's jail as a central feature. Historically accurate since these remote mountain towns often served as the only law enforcement for hundreds of square miles. The developers also cleverly placed the town at a crossroads, just like real mountain settlements that survived by controlling access to mountain passes and charging tolls to travelers. Armadillo. Armadillo earns points for atmosphere, but loses them for being largely abandoned due to cholera. However, its backstory is rooted in real frontier tragedy. The town is inspired by several real Texas frontier settlements, particularly those along cattle driving routes like the Chisholm Trail. Towns like Abilene, Kansas and Dodge City experienced similar boom and bust cycles. The name Armadillo reflects the Spanish influence in Texas, armadillo being Spanish for little armored one. Many Texas towns have Spanish-derived names reflecting the region's complex cultural history. What makes Armadillo historically significant is its representation of how disease could devastate frontier communities. Cholera outbreaks were common in the 1800s, often wiping out entire settlements. The real town of Indianola, Texas, was abandoned after multiple yellow fever epidemics, much like Armadillo's fate. Rockstar's attention to detail shows in the boarded-up buildings and the few remaining residents who refused to leave, mirroring real ghost towns where stubborn settlers clung to failed dreams long after economic collapse. Now we're getting into towns that truly capture the spirit of the American frontier. These settlements tell stories of ambition, survival, and the clash between civilization and wilderness.
Rhodes. Rhodes represents the post-Civil War South perfectly, complete with its underlying racial tensions and economic struggles. The town is heavily inspired by small southern towns in Louisiana and Mississippi during Reconstruction. The name Rhodes likely references Cecil Rhodes, the British imperialist, reflecting the town's themes of power and exploitation. Historically, towns like Rhodes were caught between the old plantation system and the new industrial age. The presence of two feuding families, the Grays and Braithwaites, mirrors real conflicts like the Hatfield-McCoy feud, which lasted from 1863 to 1891. The town's architecture, with its raised buildings and wide porches, is authentically Southern, designed to deal with flooding and heat. The general store, saloon, and sheriff's office layout follows the typical pattern of post-war Southern towns trying to rebuild their economies. Rockstar brilliantly captured the social dynamics by placing the wealthy family's mansions just outside town, while the working-class areas cluster around the railroad tracks. A geographic representation of the South's rigid class system that persisted long after the Civil War ended. Wallace Station
Station. Wallace Station might be small, but it represents a crucial piece of American infrastructure history, the railroad. The station is inspired by countless small railroad stops across the American West, particularly those along the Transcontinental Railroad, completed in 1869. Towns like Laramie, Wyoming, and North Platte, Nebraska, served similar functions. The name Wallace Station likely honors William Wallace, though not the Scottish hero, more probably one of the many American railroad executives or engineers named Wallace who helped build the Western Rail Network. These railroad towns were lifelines for frontier communities, bringing supplies, mail, and news from the outside world. They also brought conflict, as railroad companies often had more power than local governments and could make or break entire communities. The developers included authentic details like the water tower for steam engines and the telegraph lines that connected these remote outposts to the wider world. What's particularly clever is how the station's modest size reflects the reality that most railroad stops were just platforms with a small building, not the grand terminals we see in movies. Van Horn Trading Post captures the essence of frontier commerce and the dangerous isolation of the American Southwest. The trading post is inspired by real establishments along routes like the Santa Fe Trail and the Butterfield Overland Mail Route. Places like Mesilla, New Mexico, and Fort Stockton, Texas, served similar functions as supply stops in hostile territory. The name Van Horn comes from the real Van Horn, Texas, established in the 1880s as a water stop for the Texas and Pacific Railway. The real town was named after Lieutenant James Judson Van Horn, a Civil War veteran who surveyed the area. Trading posts like this were often the only civilization for hundreds of miles. They served as banks, post offices, saloons, and general stores all in one. The constant threat of Apache raids made these places incredibly dangerous, but also incredibly profitable for those brave enough to operate them. Rockstar's version perfectly captures the paranoid atmosphere with its fortified appearance and suspicious residents. The developers even included period-accurate details like the thick adobe walls designed to stop arrows and bullets, and the strategic placement near a water source that made the location valuable enough to risk the dangers.
Valentine. Valentine is everything a Western town should be: muddy, chaotic, and alive with possibility and danger. The town is inspired by cattle towns like Dodge City, Kansas, and Abilene, Kansas, during their heyday in the 1870s and 1880s. These were the endpoints of great cattle drives from Texas, where cowboys would spend months of wages in a few wild nights. The name Valentine is particularly clever. It suggests both romance and violence, perfectly capturing the dual nature of these frontier towns. They were places where fortunes were made and lost, where love and death walked hand in hand. Historically, towns like Valentine were incredibly violent. Dodge City averaged one murder every 10 days during its peak years. The presence of the saloon, hotel, and general store in a tight cluster reflects the real layout of cattle towns, designed to separate cowboys from their money as efficiently as possible. The mud-covered streets aren't just for atmosphere, they're historically accurate. These towns were built quickly with little infrastructure, and the constant traffic of cattle and horses turned main streets into muddy quagmires. Rockstar's genius shows in details like the livestock pens at the edge of town and the doctor's office positioned strategically near the saloon, a grim reminder of how violence and medicine went hand in hand in these lawless settlements. But even Valentine's authentic chaos can't compete with our number one choice, a town so perfectly crafted, it represents the pinnacle of what the American frontier could become: Saint Denis. Saint Denis isn't just the best town in Red Dead Redemption 2, it's one of the greatest video game cities ever created, and its real-world inspiration makes it even more remarkable. The city is directly based on New Orleans, Louisiana, during the Gilded Age of the 1880s and 1890s. From the French Quarter architecture to the streetcars, every detail screams authentic New Orleans. The name Saint Denis is the French form of Saint Denis, reflecting New Orleans' French colonial heritage. The real Saint Denis is a suburb of Paris, connecting the game's city to both French and American history. New Orleans during this period was a fascinating contradiction, a cosmopolitan city in the American South, a place where French, Spanish, African, and Anglo cultures blended into something entirely unique. It was the South's largest city and most important port, a gateway between America and the world. Rockstar captured this perfectly. The city's diverse population, from wealthy industrialists to struggling immigrants, reflects the real New Orleans' complex social hierarchy. The presence of the theater,
fine restaurants, and electric lights shows a city embracing modernity while maintaining its unique character. The trolley system is historically accurate. New Orleans had one of the first electric streetcar systems in America, installed in the 1890s. The French Quarter-inspired architecture, with its wrought iron balconies and Creole cottages, is meticulously researched. What makes Saint Denis truly special is how it represents the end of the frontier era. This is what the West was becoming, not endless wilderness, but modern cities connected to a global economy. It's the perfect setting for the gang's final chapter, as they're forced to confront a world that no longer has room for outlaws. The developers even included authentic period details like gaslighting mixed with early electric systems, cobblestone streets giving way to paved roads, and the contrast between old Creole mansions and new industrial buildings that defined New Orleans' transformation into a modern American city. Saint Denis represents more than just great game design. It's a window into a pivotal moment in American history when the frontier was closing and the modern world was being born. Each of these towns tells a story not just of the game's world, but of our own history, the dreams, struggles, and transformations that built America. From the industrial despair of Annesburg to the cosmopolitan sophistication of Saint Denis, Red Dead Redemption 2's towns are more than just game locations. They're interactive history lessons that bring the American frontier to life in ways no textbook ever could.